Welcome to the I'm Perfectly Divine podcast, a place for the strong, sensitive, spiritual seeker to recognize the perfection of your human journey as a pathway to both the emotional and spiritual worlds through proven and grounded frameworks that support you to live in the wholeness you already are. For over the past 2 decades, I have supported people from all around the world, as well as Fortune 500 companies, to dissolve the divisions within them and live with greater empowerment and love. This podcast is an exploration of the paradoxes that befuddle us as we live our lives being both human and divine. Together, you and I, along with other experts, will navigate integrating psychology and spirituality, the divine feminine and the divine masculine, the darkness and the light, to create greater sacred union from within. I believe through your remembering that you are innately divine, that you will allow yourself to more openly shine. So let's get to it, because your unique light is needed more than ever. Hello, wise ones who also happen to be strong, sensitive, and spiritual. Welcome back to the I'm Perfectly Divine podcast. Here we are on episode number 2, where I'm going to be sharing more with you about my love and devotion to the divine feminine. And I think it's important to explain this and give you a sense of my background so that you understand who you're listening to, and really where I come from and the lens in which I recognize and celebrate the divine feminine, and that you also recognize as I celebrate the divine feminine, there is a complete honor and celebration and devotion also to the divine masculine. And this is important to me because I feel that as the divine feminine rises, and there is this calling where more of us are connecting or hearing this call to reconnect and uplift the divine feminine, that there is also an honoring and respect of the divine masculine as well. So my journey is one that is probably actually pretty traditional. I grew up being raised Christian, and really not having a clue what it meant to be in feminine power and really honoring the divine feminine. The feminine was this male version of what it meant to be in our feminine, which was more about beauty and having some sensual allure, but not overly sexual, and just all these frames that come from the patriarchy about what it means to be in your feminine, and certainly not in feminine power. And this has been a piece that's been a continued unfolding of really seeing the strength of what it means to be feminine, because growing up in a traditional Christian upbringing, the feminine's diminished, not just through Christianity, but many religions, most religions, the feminine is diminished. And in Christianity, women really aren't seen as a reflection of the divine. And so it was missing in my upbringing of understanding. But I was still someone who I would say who has always been really spiritually connected. And I say this certainly not to make myself stand out in any way. I think so many of us have different ways in which we have connected to the divine, to our spirituality. But again, I just want to give you some background with mine to kind of ground us in the frameworks that I'm going to be sharing from, and also to ground in spirituality, because spirituality sometimes can be kind of out there. And where the I'm Perfectly Divine podcast is really coming from is the importance of grounding our spirituality into our humanity, and how that shows up as we are in our human experiences. So as we parent, as we love a partner, as we love our friends, as we show up in our careers and with our work, how is this love being expressed through us? And it's important for it to be grounded because we need our love to be reflected in our interactions with others and where it's felt in others. And sometimes if the spiritual isn't grounded, it can be really scattered and or just not really embodied. And so that has been part of my experiences as well that I want to share with you. But I feel that that embodiment piece is very important because it helps us use the emotional to stabilize who we are in our human experience so that we feel really solid, so that we feel very contained with all the spiritual connection that we know ourselves to be. And so that shows up as being able to have these solid relationships with others. And that's something I'm very proud of. While I am proud of the work that I've done in my life, what gives me the most satisfaction and gratitude are my relationships, especially my relationship with my husband. We've been married for over 25 years and truly still are in love. And that to me is as a requirement of being married is to feel and experience that love between one another. And we just had a very romantic and spiritual and powerful celebration of our 25th anniversary, which I'm so grateful for, as well as my 3 children who I'm just over the moon proud of, not because of external accomplishments, although they've done well with that. It's the biggest compliment I receive is just on who they are as people, and that people just enjoy them and they can connect with others and each in their unique ways. And so I'm so proud of that. And they are their own unique people. But I'm proud that through our love and devotion through them, that can be an expression that they also get to share with others as well. So let's get into a bit of my background so I can share more about the framework in which I grew up in and how that evolved throughout my journey. So I grew up in the Christian faith, but with 2 slightly different notions around Christianity, because I had my parents on one side who were Catholic and we went to church every Sunday and all the holy days and so forth. And then I had my grandmother who was a sector of Protestant that had slightly different beliefs. They went to church on Saturday and it was more of an all day or at least a half day affair. So let me start with my grandmother, because on Saturdays she would teach to the children before there was church for the rest of the congregation. And I loved helping my grandmother prepare for her teachings each Saturday morning. And she had these little felt cutouts of Jesus and animals. And it was really just teaching about the love of Jesus. And I was so in love with Jesus. And I can just remember sitting on the floor next to my grandmother's lap and so proud of her and the love that she expressed through her teachings. And then we'd go into the main congregation, and that would be another, I don't know, couple hour service. And so I think we would be gone from like 8 something till probably early afternoon. And so that would be my Saturdays. And then on Sundays, I would go to Catholic mass with my parents. And what I enjoyed about that was the ritual. There was, you knew every week what was some of the aspects that were going to be taking place. And I loved the ritual to it all. I loved memorizing the prayer. And I really loved the incense. That was something that I remember really loving. And so I always felt this close connection to Jesus. I would also have some, I guess you would say, visitations with Mother Mary when I was young, that I didn't know quite what to do with, but so that was part of my experience. I would say I grew up very connected and devoted, where even in high school and college, I continued to go to church. I became a Eucharistic minister. That was a place where women could participate in Catholicism. And that was something that was important to me. My husband and I met while I was in my 20s, and he was not Catholic. And let's say I asked, quote unquote, made my husband become Catholic so that we could get married. And then a spiritual growth expansion started happening for me. So at the time right after my husband and I were married, that's when I started to get my degree in clinical psychology. And psychology is this space where it really opens you up to start questioning yourself and questioning life. And so I was going through my own emotional unfolding process where I was starting to understand my sadness, my anxiety. And at the same time, I was introduced to a group of women, and we formed our first women's circle. This was a circle that was different to me than any other women friendships that I had, because it was really about seeing the love and beauty and expansiveness in each other, and holding and each other up, and seeing that and honoring that and celebrating that, without some of the pieces of women's friendships that I had when I was younger, which was there was jealousies, and it just felt messy all the time. And this was so different because there was this undertone of we're here to truly uplift each other, and we would join together to start to explore some more energies around the universe, I would call it back then, where we were looking into our chakras, we were meditating, we were listening to sound healing meditations and crystal bowls. And so we were really expanding into all this. I started practicing with divination tools and tarot and all sorts of things, right? And so this was already starting to conflict with my Catholic beliefs. I mean, part of Catholicism was even against astrology back then. I don't know if it still is, but so me really dipping my toe into this space was like, ooh, I don't know, something bad's going to happen. And I was worried about that. But what I kept feeling when I was experiencing these different tools and being with these women was just this heart opening. So one of the biggest expansion pieces of my spiritual journey, especially at this point in my life, which again was in my 20s, was when one of the women from my group, Donna, who's still a dear friend today, she went to see a shaman. And she was like, this shaman is amazing. You have to go see her. And this was a shaman that back in the day, I was in Chicago, was working with the Chicago Bucks Chicago Bucks. I'm from Milwaukee right now. So Milwaukee Bucks, hello. Chicago Bulls back in the day. She worked with the Chicago Bulls with Phil Jackson when when it was with Michael Jordan. It was crazy, right? And anyways, I went to her, and it completely blew my mind. She read and saw me in a way I never experienced before in my life. It was like, how could this person know my strengths, my challenges, just by reading each of my chakras and understanding where there was energy stuck, where there was energy flowing, and so forth. And here I was doing something that, I mean, right before this shamanic journey, I literally was like, had this fear that I was walking into, quote unquote, the hands of the devil. I mean, I was scared because this totally went against my upbringing, but there was something calling me to this expansiveness. And it's that expansiveness of the heart has always been my true guide, because if this has led me to understanding more about myself, more about others, then how can this be wrong? And really what I was learning was how to begin to trust myself, how to begin to trust my inner voice and take care and nurture the aspects of myself that needed love and nurturing, which for me was both had spiritual context as well as emotional context. And so I know I keep calling out to you if you are sensitive and spiritual. And I know that emotional sensitivity is something that has been denigrated as well, along with the feminine, right? And that's not by coincidence because so much of our sensitivity, especially our emotional sensitivity, is a necessary component to us truly knowing ourselves and and integrating our emotional and spiritual selves in our human experiences. So here I am, I go see the shaman and I'm like, this is it. Like, this is my life. So much so that I was getting my degree in clinical psychology and I was like, I don't want to do a traditional practice. I need to bring in this spiritual side. And so that's where I went. I got trained also as a spiritual life coach and really went on this deep dive of studying as many religions as I could. Besides Christianity, Judaism, Islam, Buddhism, Taoism, and later this went into further divination tools, as well as starting to work with archangels, angels, goddesses, Wiccan, pagan, and just really seeing that in each of these, there's this thread of love, there's this thread of expansion. And I was in awe because I always saw how each different philosophy or framework still led to this universal love and expansion that I was feeling within me. And so I know that people can have their fears and judgments about, maybe some of these different ways of understanding the spiritual and the divine within you. Um, what I'll say to that is that in every spiritual modality there's been a misuse, an abuse, fear that has led people astray, right? And so I understand those fears. As I said, I grew up with a lot of fear, but I think it's understanding that the reason why these practices continue still to this day is because of the love and expansion in them, not because of the fear. Fear contracts and love expands. And so that's what this is really about, is how can we utilize all these different aspects that are out there, all these traditions and wisdom that's out there to better understand ourselves and the love that we already are. So here I am, I'm expanding in all these, different modalities that were totally outside uh, my tradition. And I stopped going to church. I was just like, I can't do this. This doesn't feel right to me anymore. Where's the women? And I became hurt that how women weren't represented. Just representing Mother Mary in Catholicism wasn't enough, especially the way in which she's represented, which is this virgin pure that women, if we try to, will always fall short of, right? And it's not Mother Mary as I've come to know her now, which is this high priestess who was able to bring forward the creation of Jesus through her alchemy in in her practices of really being in this place of one who is complete within oneself, because that is I don't know if it's the original meaning of virgin, but it's one of the more ancient meanings of virgin, one who is complete within themselves. And so that is where I believe so much of the original teachings of Christianity, which we're going to be getting into, lead us to understanding ourselves. Because what we have to remember, touch on this a little bit, is that Christianity was outlawed, and and so you could be put in prison by the Romans if you believed in Christianity. And so in order for Christianity to expand, it had to meet a version that the Romans were going to agree with, which was not going to allow women to rise, which was not going to honor women for in their rightful place of what is needed and necessary in our expression of love and devotion to the divine. And so that's why we've seen so much of this being lopsided and turned on its head, and a struggle. So let me get back to a little bit of my story. So here I am. I'm not going to church anymore, but I'm still in deep devotion every day. I could be in an hour meditation, hour prayer, what have you. It's just a part and a framework of who I am. And then this is when shortly thereafter we moved to Wisconsin, and there's no alternative spiritual foundations really here when I moved here 20 years ago that I could find. So it was really cultivating that in as many ways as I could, and really deepening this practice for myself. And so through it was right around that time. That's when I started to get the 4:30 a.m. wake up calls, which I talked about in episode 1. Now, this was all about emotions and really supporting me to heal my emotions, and ultimately other people with their relationship with their emotions. What I didn't realize at the time is what a feminine approach, a feminine spiritual approach to our emotions that I was receiving. I was so kind of geared into my psychological lens when it came to emotions, that this whole integrating the two, it was there on some level, but it wasn't the intertwining, the merging that I now experience and understand of why our psychological and spiritual need to be integrated, in order to allow us to feel alive and free, and to know and live our love and divinity that we are. So the 4:30 a.m. wake up calls started happening, and I was trusting that, because everything prior to that in my practice was about regaining self-trust. Because before that, and even before I went in to get my degree in clinical psychology, I did not trust myself. I did not know my voice. I knew everybody else's voice and what they wanted me to do. And I was a good Catholic girl, good Christian. And I was lost. And that was part of why I felt so much sadness and anxiety. So to get to this point where I was able to trust this wake up call, and then write it down, and trust what was coming through me, was a part of this preparation period that really allowed me to step into my knowingness, because I did not trust it. I didn't trust what was coming through when it came through, because it was telling me, for instance, I was just writing down what I was told. I wrote, and I just allowed myself to be an open channel. So then when I go back to look at it, I'm like, really? Like, this is not what I've been taught in my degree in psychology and so forth. But what really was a turning point with that was when I felt anxious. I woke up one morning anxious, and I was receiving the guidance, and how our anxiety is there to teach us and get us to the point of inner peace. And I took the steps that were coming through. I experienced inner peace. And that changed everything for me, because then the flip switched and I switched on, and I was like, okay, I get this. And then it became more and more embodied. So I was running with this. It was amazing because in many ways it was like my dream was coming true. I was out there sharing this with others. As soon as I saw that it worked for me, I shared this with clients that I had, and it worked for them. And then word of mouth spread. And soon I had a coaching practice with a wait list. I was speaking all over the place. I had media exposure. I mean, it was really, it was really a dream come true. Then I started teaching other therapists and life coaches and health coaches in this modality. And that's when the International Institute for Emotional Empowerment opened, because people were asking me to train them. They were like, I still have anxiety and I'm a therapist. I don't know what to do with this. How can you help me? So forth, right? And so I did that. And this is when um, my ego took over. I mean, there's no pretty way of saying it. It's just like my ego started to think that I was superior in some way. And along with that, the aspect of myself that did not remember my innate worthiness was using money to prove my worth. And so it became this pressure then to keep building and building and building wealth through my work as a way to prove that I'm enough, that I'm good at what I do, um, prove that the spiritual stuff matters, that this feminine approach matters, right? And it became this whole proving ground based on my ego. And that's when the divine feminine really stepped in. And that's when I started getting calls from Mary Magdalene, because she was like, yeah, this, I didn't know it at the time, but what she was basically saying is like, this is the unhealthy feminine and the unhealthy masculine intertwined within you. And we need to resolve this. And so from what was happening in my human experience was, I was putting myself out there. Things were not getting the feedback that I hoped to get. Things weren't working. And I decided to step out of the personal development world. And I started to approach corporations, because I could see at the time my science mind was still working and still doing the research and still seeing that people were struggling with their mental health. And so I turned to corporations and said, hey, your employees are really struggling. And they're like, yeah, Michelle, we cover mental health like 30 minutes once a year. I think we're good. And I was like, okay, I don't think so, but all right. But turning to corporate helped me, because I was able to step back from the personal development and the whole online thing and all that. And that's when Mary Magdalene stepped in and she said, you need to go on a journey. And so it was bit by bit. And ultimately, this is when I opened myself into a priestess path that not only explored Mary Magdalene, um, but also other goddesses, as well as Yeshua, which is Jesus, and really expand this understanding of how these ancient goddesses are all working through this path to the divine feminine, and that we need the uplifting and the upholding of both the divine feminine and the divine masculine, which I believe Mary Magdalene and Yeshua represent, in order to really bring out this love into ourselves and into the world. So this was a 7-year journey of stripping me raw, vulnerable. I was completely untethered. I I struggled with being here. I didn't want to live. Um, it it stripped down it stripped me down to my core. So I've had dark nights of the soul. This was a 7-year journey of really unraveling the unhealthy feminine, which shows up as not knowing our worth, our innate worth, not knowing our innate love, um, and also the unhealthy masculine, where it's all about the external and how we look to the external and what we accomplish in the external and so forth. And I don't want you to freak out that like you have to go on this 7-year journey. Part of the struggle for me is that the emotional piece that I was going through and the spiritual places where I was being guided to were not integrated. So, and this is why I'm so passionate about I'm Perfectly Divine, because I want to bridge the emotional and the spiritual, because I feel like we either go on these emotional journeys and we go to therapy and we do the shadow work and we go deep within, or we go on these spiritual journeys and it can have its own depth of work and healing that is taking place. But for me, without this integration, without understanding how the emotional and spiritual fit together, and if you're not watching me, I've got my hands clasped together because it's part of the sacred union that we need in order to truly remember, remember all of who we are, the love that you innately are. And without the two intertwined, we tend to struggle. And so I was in this struggle. I also have a very tricky ego. I think I was given a tricky ego so that when people come to me to do the deep dive into the underworld, into the darkness, that I have no judgment about that and the things that we do on our human experience, because even if I haven't done them, I know at the core the same shame themes that have us act that way. So I may not have done a particular action, but I know that my shame is capable of the same misdirected action that someone else's misdirected action took them, right? So this has been a journey to help me really work with my ego, understand the ego is not bad. It's part of our journey to really remembering ourselves. And so I have compassion for that, and I wouldn't change a thing, because this is what I mean about I'm perfectly divine. I used to think that something like that, where if I were to admit that my ego made me feel superior, well, oh my gosh, I'm so imperfect. I can never talk to people because of this imperfection. And now it's recognizing that it's all so perfect, because when we allow ourselves a journey like that, a sacred, sacred journey like that, you will know love in yourself that you didn't believe you were capable of. And it's just all part of our expansion. It's all part of our remembering. And so it really is this sacredness. So, but again, I was struggling. I didn't know about how to integrate this until I kept getting breadcrumbs left by the goddess to piece together uh, my spiritual journey and my emotional journey and create this integration from within. And so this has really been a process, again, of healing the unhealthy feminine and the unhealthy masculine aspects of myself. And by no way am I claiming at all whatsoever that I am done with that journey. It's a continuous journey of remembering. I just know what it's like to go to the depths of the despair. And yeah, I get that. So our emotional needs the spiritual to support us in remembering our divinity and our true innate worthiness and love. And our spiritual needs the emotional to support us to remember the divinity and being human and bring greater understanding to our emotional challenges, our shame, our triggers. And when we unify this within ourselves, we're going to feel the expansiveness of, I think, what it means to bring heaven to earth. And so ultimately, this sacred union that I'm talking about is what I believe are the true teachings of Mary Magdalene and Yeshua. And I'm going to go into that more. But that's the whole point of what Mary Magdalene went through to really become complete within herself, and what Yeshua, Jesus, as he shows us what it means to really die, give an ego death to ourselves, and then resurrect, that this is the path of our journey to expansiveness and love. So there is so much more to share. I hope that some of this relates to you. Feel free to write in. I would love to hear about your experience as well. And I am just so excited to go on this journey with you together. So I feel very strong with the emotional aspects. That has been my life's work for the past couple decades. And I continue to grow in that realm. And I'm certainly still a student when it comes to bringing in different spiritual realms. I mean, how can you stop on the spiritual path, right? But this is the offerings are always coming from love, and I know that there can be fear in some of these alternative modalities. But all I can say is like this is gonna sound strange, but I'll just say, like, I can't watch anything that's like has to do with evil, like anything, anything in that realm. And so, yeah, like that's just not what this is about. But I understand and I have compassion if you have fear. Just open your heart and see if this is the right path for you. My invitation to you, until we reconnect next time, is that you know that you are divine perfection as you are right now. You are wholeness as you are right now. And there is nothing to prove, just to remember.